Mireya Collins, a 21-year-old young woman, never imagined that her life could change so drastically in such a short time. Just a few months ago, she had been a passionate student, dreaming of becoming an interior designer. But after the sudden passing of her father, Mireya found herself trapped in a relentless cycle of debt and despair. Her father, an alcoholic, had left behind an overwhelming amount of debt, forcing her to put aside her dreams and take on any job she could find. From waiting tables and cleaning houses to selling goods, she had tried everything, yet it was never enough to make ends meet. With each passing day, the burden grew heavier. Then, one day, an unexpected job offer came her way, a personal caregiver position for a wealthy man named Leonard Hayes. Leonard was no ordinary man. Once a powerful and successful CEO, he had lost everything after a devastating car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. Rumors painted him as a cold and distant man, someone who had shut himself off from the world and trusted no one. Mireya knew this job would be far from easy, but the salary was more than she had ever been offered before, and it could be the lifeline she desperately needed. With little choice left, she accepted the offer, unaware that this decision would change her life forever. On her first day at Leonard Hayes' mansion, Mireya couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The house was enormous, radiating wealth and sophistication, yet it felt eerily cold, as if joy had long abandoned it. The butler led her up to Leonard's study. As the door swung open, she saw a man sitting in a wheelchair, his presence as imposing as the rumors had described. His sharp features and deep blue eyes should have been mesmerizing, but there was no warmth in them, only indifference. "You're the new one." Leonard's voice was deep, almost emotionless. Mireya took a steady breath, determined not to let his cold demeanor shake her. "Yes, I'm Mireya Collins. I'll be your caregiver from now on." Leonard arched an eyebrow, a smirk forming on his lips, one that held no amusement. "I don't need a caregiver. If you're here to pity me, you can leave right now." His words were like a slap in the face, but Mireya stood her ground. "I'm not here to pity you. I'm here to do my job." For a moment, Leonard said nothing, as if he hadn't expected that response. Then, he turned his wheelchair away, muttering under his breath, "Do whatever you want, just don't expect me to cooperate." Mireya knew this was going to be a battle, but she wasn't one to give up easily. The first few days working with Leonard Hayes were far from easy. He wasn't just cold, he was deliberately difficult. If she prepared breakfast for him, he would ignore it. If she assisted him with his therapy exercises, he would refuse to cooperate. No matter what Mireya did, Leonard either dismissed her efforts or made things unnecessarily challenging. But instead of giving up, Mireya remained patient. She understood that beneath his hardened exterior was a man battling his own demons. She didn't try to force change upon him, she simply stayed, offering help when he needed it. One day, while assisting him with his physical therapy, she noticed an old photograph on his desk. It was a picture of him standing beside an older man, most likely his father. But what caught her attention wasn't the person in the photo, it was Leonard's smile. A genuine, warm smile, completely different from the cold expression he wore now. "You used to be different," Mireya murmured without thinking. Leonard glanced at the photo before his gaze turned distant. After a long pause, he finally said, "People change." It was the first time she had seen him show even a glimpse of real emotion. From that moment on, something shifted between them. Leonard remained distant, but he no longer rejected her help outright. When she assisted him with his therapy, he stopped resisting completely. When she made coffee in the morning, he drank it without complaint. And then, small conversations began to take place. At first, just simple questions, but over time, Leonard started to share more. He spoke about his work, the immense pressure of running a company, and the accident that had altered his life forever. Mireya, in turn, shared her own past, about the hardships she faced after her father's death, about the dreams of becoming an interior designer that she had to put aside to pay off her family's debt. An invisible connection began to form between them. They were no longer just a patient and his caregiver. They were two people who found an unspoken understanding in each other's pain. Mireya wasn't sure when things began to shift. Maybe it was in the quiet mornings when she entered the room and found Leonard already waiting for her, something he never used to do. Or perhaps it was the way he no longer avoided her gaze, but instead held it for just a little longer than necessary. Their feelings didn't grow through grand gestures or flowery words. They bloomed in the little moments, like the way Leonard silently watched her as she moved around the kitchen, or how Mireya unconsciously smiled every time he made a dry, sarcastic remark. One afternoon, during Leonard's physical therapy session, something unexpected happened. She placed her hand on his arm to assist him, but instead of pulling away as he usually did, Leonard let it stay there, just for a second longer, as if trying to hold onto the warmth. They both felt the shift, yet neither dared to acknowledge it. Mireya was afraid. She knew her place, knew she couldn't allow herself to feel something she wasn't supposed to. She was just a caregiver, and Leonard belonged to a world she could never be a part of. Leonard was afraid too. He had lost so much after the accident, and he wasn't sure if he had the strength to love someone again. But every time Mireya left the room, he found himself waiting for her to return, and when she smiled, he realized he never wanted to lose that feeling. But unspoken feelings have a way of becoming a quiet torment. They both knew something was growing between them, something undeniable. The only question was, would they ever be brave enough to face it? As time passed, Leonard Hayes was no longer the cold, distant man he once was. He began to trust Mireya, not with words, but with the way he allowed her to help him. They spent more time together, and those fleeting moments slowly turned into something deeper. Mireya also realized that she no longer saw Leonard as just her employer. She cared for him in ways she never expected. Even on his worst days, the way he looked at her had changed, no longer filled with defensiveness, but with something softer, something unspoken. But, as with all things, challenges soon followed. Leonard's family, especially his mother, did not approve of Mireya's presence. To them, she was nothing more than a hired worker, someone who had no place in Leonard's world. One evening, his mother called Mireya into the living room, her voice sharp and direct. "Do you really think you can change his life? Leonard doesn't need your pity, and I won't allow you to interfere with his future." Mireya clenched her fists, trying to stay calm. "I don't pity him. I just want to help him find himself again." But to his family, that meant nothing. Their opposition was not just in words. They pressured Leonard, urging him to keep his distance from her. At the same time, his company made it clear that associating with someone like her, someone beneath their status, would only damage his reputation. Mireya began to question whether she truly belonged in his world. Not wanting to become a burden, she decided to leave. But before she could pack her things, Leonard came to find her. "You think leaving is what's best for me?" His voice was steady, but there was something raw beneath it. Mireya lowered her gaze. "You have a future that I don't belong in, Leonard." He held her gaze for a long moment before saying, "Then, I'll decide for myself who gets to be part of my future." Mireya had never seen Leonard so certain. But was their connection strong enough to withstand the obstacles ahead? The pressure from his family and company had pushed Leonard Hayes to his limits. He couldn't stop his family from looking down on Mireya. He couldn't make his company accept her. But the one thing he knew for certain was that he couldn't lose her. Mireya, however, felt differently. As much as it hurt, she believed that leaving was the best choice for both of them. Before she could make that decision final, something unexpected happened: Leonard's critical surgery. This was his only chance at a full recovery, but the risks were high. The doctors explained that if the procedure succeeded, he might walk again after months of therapy. If it failed, he could lose all mobility permanently. Mireya hesitated. If she left now, Leonard would have to face everything alone. But if she stayed, she would only fall deeper into feelings she had tried so hard to suppress. "Are you scared?" she asked the night before his surgery as they sat in quiet contemplation. Leonard was silent for a long moment before he finally said, "No, because you're here." His words made something tighten in her chest, but she didn't respond. Instead, she simply reached for his hand and held it. The next morning, Leonard was taken into the operating room. Mireya waited outside, anxiety gripping her heart. Hours dragged by until finally the doctor stepped out with a reassuring smile. The surgery was successful. Now it's all up to his recovery. Mireya exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. But she knew this wasn't the end, because even if Leonard could regain his ability to walk, there was still one greater obstacle left: the feelings they had both tried to deny for so long. Would this be their chance to finally face the truth? After the surgery, Leonard began his recovery with a newfound determination. But this time, it wasn't just for himself. It was for Mireya. His family still refused to accept her. One evening while he was resting, his mother and a few relatives visited, trying once again to convince him. "Leonard, you need to think clearly. You have a future to protect. That girl can't be a part of it." Before, he might have stayed silent, but not this time. His grip tightened on the arms of his wheelchair, his voice unwavering. "I've already lost too much, but the one thing I refuse to lose is her." The room fell into stunned silence. His mother looked shocked. One of his cousins scoffed. "She's just a caregiver, Leonard. She doesn't belong in this world." Leonard met their gazes firmly, his voice unwavering. "You may not accept her, but I do. She is not just my caregiver. She is the reason I am standing here today. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's you who doesn't belong in my life." The tension in the room was thick, but for the first time, Leonard didn't feel controlled by their expectations. He had made his choice. 2 months later, feeling stronger, Leonard asked Mireya to help him walk. They went to the rose garden behind the mansion, where a small stone path stretched between the blooming flowers. Mireya stood beside him, hope shining in her eyes. "Are you ready?" Leonard took a deep breath before gripping her hand. His first step was unsteady, the second slow. But little by little, he moved forward. Under the golden hues of the setting sun, surrounded by the scent of roses, Mireya squeezed his hand, her smile radiant. "You did it!" Leonard paused, breathing heavily, but a look of satisfaction crossed his face. Then he turned to her, his gaze resolute. "Mireya," he said softly, "I don't want you to be just my caregiver anymore." Her heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Leonard took a deep breath, his grip tightening on her hand. "Mireya, I never thought I'd feel this way again. I was lost, stuck in a world where I believed I was beyond saving. But then you came along, and suddenly everything changed. You gave me hope when I had none left. I don't want to go another day without knowing you're mine. Be my girlfriend." Her eyes widened, emotions overwhelming her. This wasn't a declaration from a wealthy businessman. This was a confession from a man who had fought for her, from a heart that had finally learned how to love. Mireya stood frozen in the rose garden, Leonard Hayes' words echoing in her mind. "I want you to be my girlfriend." It was such a simple sentence, yet it carried everything he had never dared to say before. She looked into his deep blue eyes. For the first time, they held no pain, no walls, only sincerity and hope. "Leonard." She whispered his name, her heart pounding. He didn't rush her for an answer, simply tightening his grip on her hand, silently telling her that this was real, not out of gratitude, not because she had helped him, but because he truly loved her. Mireya took a deep breath before finally smiling. "And if I say yes? Are you sure you won't regret it?" Leonard chuckled, his voice filled with warmth and certainty. "I've spent too long figuring this out. Now, I've never been more sure." With the roses in full bloom and the golden sunset casting its glow around them, Mireya finally nodded. Then, yes. Leonard exhaled, relief washing over him. Without another word, he pulled her into his embrace. No more barriers, no more doubts. Just two people who had found each other through life's hardships. 1 year later, Leonard had regained the ability to walk, though his recovery was still ongoing. But he was no longer the cold, distant man he once was. He had changed, and Mireya was the reason. His family, especially his mother, had kept their distance from Mireya, but over time, they could no longer deny that without her, Leonard wouldn't have come this far. One afternoon, as Mireya arranged flowers in the living room, Leonard's mother approached her. Mireya, I owe you an apology." Mireya turned, stunned. It was the first time the woman had ever spoken to her so gently. "At first, I thought you didn't belong in Leonard's life," she admitted. "I was afraid you were just a fleeting presence, but I was wrong. Without you, he would have never recovered." Mireya felt the sincerity in her words, but she still hesitated. For so long, she had been seen as an outsider, someone unworthy of Leonard. But now, his mother was looking at her with gratitude instead of disdain. "You don't have to thank me," Mireya said quietly. "I didn't help him because I wanted recognition. I helped him because I love him, because he deserves to be happy." Leonard's mother took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And I see that now. I was wrong to judge you. I was wrong to doubt what you mean to him. Thank you for saving my son in a way none of us could." Leonard's mother sighed before reaching out and squeezing Mireya's hand. "Thank you." At that moment, Mireya knew she was finally accepted. That evening, in the rose garden, under twinkling fairy lights, Mireya found Leonard standing among scattered rose petals. As she stepped closer, he suddenly dropped to one knee. Mireya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her heart racing. "Mireya," Leonard's voice was steady, but she could hear the slightest tremble. "My entire life, I've searched for something to fill the emptiness inside me. I thought money, power, success would bring me happiness. But when I lost everything, you were there." Tears welled in her eyes. Leonard took a shaky breath, his hands trembling slightly as he held the ring. "Mireya, before you, I was a broken man. I had given up on myself, on happiness, on love. But you were my light in the darkest moments. You showed me what it meant to truly live again. And now, I can't imagine a future without you in it." His voice wavered, but his determination did not. "So, I'm asking you, not as a man with wealth, not as someone who once had power, but as a man who loves you with everything he has. Mireya Collins, will you spend the rest of your life with me?" He opened a small velvet box, a simple ring, but filled with the weight of his love. "Mireya Collins, will you spend the rest of your life with me?" Mireya laughed through her tears. She looked at the man before her, a man who had once lost everything, but had now found his way back. For her. She nodded, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Leonard stood, pulling her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go again. Fireworks lit up the night sky, casting the garden in a golden glow, and in that moment, Mireya knew they had finally found their forever.